Okay. We're rolling, and we're using 12.9% of the CPU.
Is it your birthday today?
Yes, it is.
Happy birthday, Mr. Jones.
Yes, I'm 63 years old. I can't even believe I'm saying that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, yeah, I don't get it. Anyhow, okay. Now we're bumping up the video bit rate a little bit. So if we can get reports from people on the stream as to how the video's looking and audio sounding and things of that nature, that'd be great. And the CPU is settled down to 10.8, so that's still,
respectable.
We're only using a small portion of things here. Let me fire off the record. Oh, I'm not seeing myself on there. Let me hear you.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
That's not working. So let me shut it down and fire it back up again.
Okay.
Test 1 2. Test. Okay, my audio is going in. How about yours?
Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, it's working. Okay. We are rolling.
All right, Mr. Jones, thanks so much and happy birthday.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm going to start the show in 3, 2, 1. First of all, I want to give a round of thanks to Mr. Mike Jones, who is our engineer and has really been an amazing part of this program. Mr. Jones, happy birthday. You are greatly appreciated by myself and FHU and the participants in this Perilous World Radio. Had to start with that today. Second of all, yesterday I was given an insight into a scripture. Not even sure what it is right now, but I'm going to play a couple of scriptures about your body, and we'll talk about it.
2 Corinthians 6:16. For you are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? 1 Corinthians 6:19. Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own?
So there you go. The temple of the living God. I've heard this, many times throughout the course of my life, but it's becoming more and more clear to me that the spirit that dwells within this magnificent piece of machinery called a body is there, and it is what gives the body life, right? The spirit is what gives the body life. And yet, so many people don't realize the spiritual aspect of their lives. As a matter of fact, not only do they not realize it, but they don't want to know. Because knowing about the spiritual life changes the dynamic between you and the world, and it changes it both positively and negatively. So the spiritual dynamic is that you are not necessarily or actually a free agent, but you have choices, you have free choice, and those choices have to do with moral challenges that we all have to face. And so when we start to look at the idea that we have choices, we also have to realize that those choices are involved with both rewards and punishments, or let's just say positive or negative repercussions. And I think that, I remember back to when I was probably 16, 17 years old. And it seemed like when I was out in the world, feeding myself to the wood chipper of life, It would seem to me that like every several weeks, I would get sick with something. I'd get a cold. Something would happen. And well, that really set me back. Every time I got sick, I couldn't go surfing. I couldn't do the things that, I was really, really into. And so I started a process of self-examination. And I wondered, why do I get sick so often? And it was whatever it was. I don't know if I twisted my ankle or it didn't matter. There was always something happening in my life that was setting me back. And I do believe that the cause and effect relationship of that was to get me to take a look at myself. And so I did. And I wondered, and very deeply, why am I getting sick? And then I started to have this sort of a waking realization about my own involvement with the reasons why. Because how can you actually divorce what happens from the reasons why? You just simply can't. Actually doesn't work that way. Unless, of course, you are delusional, or unless, of course, you are using some kind of way to escape from reality, so much so that you don't have any sense that the cause and effect relationship is real. And I started to see that there was something that I was doing that was causing me to lose my energy, and my immune system would be lowered, and that was the reason why I would get sick. And then it was almost like a force restart. So every time you are forced to stop doing whatever you do to escape from or into something, there is a component of consciousness attached to it, believe it or not. So again, most people, they don't want to face the reality that even, and maybe especially, the bad things or the negative things that you're going through and suffering from are actually an important part of your awakening. And so you see this with people, and I wrote a book about it called Source Code, about spontaneous remission. People who are, let's say, close to death as a result of some terminal condition will sometimes have some kind of change of attitude about their life that instantly or very instantaneously, not maybe overnight, but within days or weeks, reverses their condition, and they recover from being very close to death. And somehow that changes their perspective about the life that they're living and what they're doing and maybe not doing. And so you have to realize that the cause and effect relationship, if you do not embrace even the most terrible side of the cause and effect relationship, the bad side of it, the painful side of it. And again, Jesus had to go through a terrible, horrifying, unspeakable torture in order for him to complete his mission on this earth. And so the idea that you are the temple of the living God, that your body is the temple of the living God, and in the body the Spirit dwells. And so is it possible that part of what we are experiencing is an assault on our body, on our mind, on our spirit from anti-God forces? That's the question. And the obvious answer is, well, what else could it be? The answer is the form of a question. If you don't believe that there is something there that is against your success in life, that is against your happiness in life, if you don't believe that there's some force, invisible or, let's say, recognizable, But somehow, if you don't see that it has a very powerful spiritual component to it, how can you possibly deal with it correctly or properly? You can't. You just can't. So this is why it gives rise to all of these pseudosciences, the big pharma, the soothsayers, the people who, the mumbo jumbo, the voodoo, astrology. Oh, the stars are not aligning today, so it's not a good day to go out. Whatever. There's all kinds of pseudo science and pseudo remedy that arises from not recognizing the direct connection that you have through yourself, through your being, through your body, spiritually connected to something that is sub-spiritual or anti-God, that is making you ill. But again, let's go back to this idea that without temptation, and William Prescott said, without temptation, you have no claim to virtue. But without suffering, at some level, you will not realize what the suffering is providing you in terms of what the answer is, what the real remedy is. All right, now, FHU.com is where you find the Be Still and Know exercise. It is, King David really was a deep thinking person after doing all the terrible things that he did, made him reflect deeply, and God poured his spirit into him. Be Still and Know at FHU.com. Find out more. All right, welcome back. I did want to mention that you can email me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the shows that I've been doing at david@fhu.com. Love to hear your feedback, love to hear your questions. I don't get many emails, but you can email me. And I may not respond through email, but I will try to respond to the better questions or the better thoughts at david@fhu.com. And also, I want to make a point here that this program is really here as an exploration of potential ways of looking at life that are and unfortunately, like I said, there are all kinds of pseudo prophets and pseudo fake, Trump calls it fake news. There's fake religion and fake spirituality. There's all kinds of nonsense. And I'm not saying that I'm the authority on actual spirituality, but I am trying to lend myself in every way possible to being just the messenger, to deliver whatever it is that, open myself sincerely and through meditation and prayer to trying to help people and leave this earth a little tiny bit better than it was when I got here. That's all I want to do. I just want to make my tiny little dent in somebody out there whose life, would maybe have been not well affected if I hadn't have said something that, and I've had people tell me throughout the years, hey, you said something and it changed my life. That is more for God than it is for anyone else. It's not for me. But the verification of that is really powerful. It's really powerful, and it validates purpose. Because we all have a purpose. Everybody has a purpose. And, it begins in your home, begins in the people around you. You're going to most likely be shut down by people who are not like you, who are not interested, who don't want to know. Don't let that stop you. Don't let those people daunt you. Be encouraged that if you say sometimes things that people don't want to hear, check yourself out. Make sure you're not just preaching, and make sure you're not just being holier than thou, and make sure you're not holy rolling anybody. But be sincere, tell the truth. And when people react to that, and you look at your life and you look at yourself and you say, why did they react so badly to that? Just make sure that you're not on some kind of ego trip, and that you're not trying to get high on doing the things that you should be doing on an everyday basis naturally. Because I know my dad. My dad set a great example by never pretending to be something important. Never. And yes, he did. He was a little bit self-aggrandizing at times, where he would attribute things to himself. But sometimes you do. Well, like, I said it first, or whatever. I saw it first, whatever. But that's not necessarily an ego trip. It just could be a statement of a matter of fact. And when I watched him with people, when I watched my dad dealing with people, he always tried to set them up in a relationship with their creator, not with him. He never wanted that. As a matter of fact, the basis of his organization was return you to yourself, and it would be as if we had never even known each other or met, or you'd never heard me. That was the sort of tone that he wanted. Just think about that. That's a very important component, because you don't want to take credit for things you have no power over. Even Jesus said, of myself, I can do nothing. We cannot of ourselves do anything. We're given to be able to do it. And if we're not given to be able to do it, all we can do is ask for that ability. We can only ask to be a servant. And I have to say, I'm reminded of, Charlie Kirk, who said, send me, right? That is the best answer that I think I've ever heard. And so, got to have this attitude of gratitude, like just the fact that you've been given the opportunity to live this life and to leave this planet not having just be a consumer, but be a producer of some sort, a producer of a little bit of light, a little bit of some answer of some sort to somebody that needs it at the moment. That's the gift right there. That is the gift. And yeah. And so, in my explorations, I really, you have to understand that a goldfish will actually grow, and it'll continue growing if it's given a larger pond. And so your mind is like the pond, and your conscious self is like the goldfish. And if you live in the same little pond your entire life, and you never grow out of that pond, or you never expand the size of the pond itself is an expanse of maybe God's reality. You've got to expand into God's reality, and as you do, you will grow. And it will expand and give you more space to grow, expanding beyond the things that you know into the things you've never understood. That's the secret of life, is the expansion toward the mind of God. I think Einstein said that's all he wanted to understand was the mind of God. So you'll never understand the mind of God, but I would hate to say that you never tried, right? A mind is a terrible, horrible thing to waste, because it's what you've been given as a gift of potential. What you do with it is what's important. And it's not what is important, what your limitations are, because limitations can be overcome simply by certain methods, even by just asking certain questions. So for me, I love those questions. To me, it's a gift to be able to expand into understanding your relationship with God through the right questions. If you don't have questions, you never find answers. FHU.com is where you find out more. And, my dad has tens of thousands of hours of audio. I'll play some today. FHU.com. I'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I do have some great audio of my dad today. It is a lecture. Well, it was more of a TV program that he was doing, but it's always the same sort of amazing insights that he starts right out of the gate. And so this particular lecture is probably 40 to 45 years old. It wasn't labeled with the day that he gave it. It is entitled The Crisis of Faith Through Emotion. Here it comes.
Well, hello. I'm holding up a book which reads How to Control Your Emotion. But you do need to control your emotions, and for a very good reason. Because emotions affect the way you think and the way you believe. Anybody believe that? Anybody doubt that? Well, let me show you the dynamics of this, and maybe we can get some questions going. And because everybody has crises in faith or doubt. Everybody has that. Everybody's plagued by little dark doubts. Make them do the wrong. Everybody has one thought about something, and then they end up doing the other one, just in case the first one was wrong, and the first one was right. You know what I mean? Who understands what I just said? Good. All right. Now, and that's why you make terrible mistakes, because emotion pulls on you, on your consciousness, and it pulls you into thinking. So that the end result is that you start to make decisions out of the wrong side of your thinking process. Let's describe the process, and then maybe we can take it from there. You react, you feel, you think. Now, something has to intimidate you. We call that a temptation. Behind the temptation, there's a will. Anybody who intimidates you is willful. And the reason why they intimidate you is because they want to put their ideas or their will to displace whatever will you have in you. They have to get between you and what you know is right.
Less than 2 minutes, he lays out the entire overview of how we are affected by environmental factors. 2 minutes. But unfortunately, if you understand the nature of the imprint of traumatic experience, it can happen in a split second. The things that affect us the most often occur in such quick time. It's a traumatic accident. If somebody says something to you, it could be anything that could happen in a very quick flash. And then you are now like the walking wounded. And this is what he's addressing, the idea that we have two sides of our identity. And when you start to react, you start thinking from the affected side of your identity, the ego side. Everybody has an ego. Now, without the ego, you would probably be more like in H.G. Wells' Time Machine. There were the Morlocks, who were underground cannibals, and then there were the Eloi, who were pampered and fragile and taken care of, and herded as a food source. And so if you didn't have an ego, you would be completely vulnerable to everything. So part of the ego itself is a sensory device that reacts to things for whatever reason, for every reason. And without that, what would we be? So yeah, I've heard somebody say one time, wherever ego, I go. Yes, that's true. You can't exist without an ego. You might as well be in a waking coma. So the ego is not the problem. You have one of two kinds of ego. This is the other thing about the duality of the human experience, the two sides of the human experience. The one side is, let's say, from above. The other side is below. Now you have this ego that is being pulled in between the two sides. And so, there's a saying, I think it's scriptural, pride goeth before the fall. Or to some extent, their pride is involved before something bad happens. And so pride is a self focus of some sort that takes you away from reality. But what happens is that when you react badly to bad people, whether you think, oh, I'm never going to be like that, right? But without realizing it, they've set you up to be just like they are, because you always somehow reflect what it is that you resent or you hate. And the compensations can be in the millions to think that you're not like the thing that has hurt you the most. But you're also not aware that by overcompensating and trying to be the extreme opposite, you're going to another degree of self-destruction. See, we shouldn't be swinging like a pendulum from one extreme to the other. We should always somehow find our equilibrium. If you watch water always finds its own level. And I think Bruce Lee, the karate champion, said, he flow like water. But water doesn't necessarily conform to the environment the way that we do, because water has its own properties. Water is not necessarily subject in the way that the human mind, heart, and soul are to the world that we live in. So this is what's being pointed out here, that when you are tempted, this is what Roy is saying, it creates a crisis, and depending upon the inclination of your soul, and here's my point, you either have a humble soul or you have a prideful soul. The prideful soul is like a ping pong ball, and it's being smacked around on a ping pong table of life. A humble soul doesn't take it the same way. A humbled soul looks at the temptation. A humbled soul sees the opportunity to stay calm, not be angry, even though, being angry is a natural human thing. The humble soul, the humble self, relates to the world from a humble place. And I'm not talking about meek. I'm talking about humble, which means, I think it was, who was it? It was Epictetus, who said, somebody criticized him, and Epictetus said, well, if you knew my real personality, if you knew my real flaws. See, so there's always a way to look at things that is different than the reaction way of looking at things. This is what is being conveyed in this lecture here. And I do have time for another one, so let's play another one here.
Human beings differ from animals in that we have a conscience. Or, when we're into the conscience, it's consciousness. When we're separated from the conscience, or the consciousness, we're in conflict with consciousness, we're called conscience. Is that too difficult? In other words, there's a space inside you. And when you're lost in your thoughts, then you think from the dark side. And the spirit of the dark side enters through emotionality. That anybody who wants to control you will make you first emotional. And when you become emotional, your consciousness, you lose your center, the ground of your being. You come out of this inner space where you know what's right. You're born with it. You're born with a sense. Don't let anybody confuse you that right and wrong is something other people teach you. It can end up that way if you're not careful, so that you become a mechanical robot. You know, that you have other people's values and you make decisions according to those implanted values. Very rigid and mechanical. It won't stand you in very good stead in life. I'm saying there's a very delicate spirit of understanding things which is within you in a wordless way. And that dimension is a kind of knowledge, and it's a kind of knowledge that isn't with words, it isn't thinking.
Yes. Yeah. Again, this is going back, 35, 40 years, maybe longer, 1980s. And he was saying things that I don't think the world was ready for yet. Now, science is beginning to prove that this thing that we call identity, there's a couple of different facets to it. One of which is that we are imprinted, kind of like Pavlovian conditioning, like trained animals, and we're imprinted with the identities of our environment. But there's another part of us that we were born with that is directly still connected to the source of our actual existence. And what happens is that we are slowly but surely converted to the source of the problems of life, the source outside of us. And, you know, the Bible says, be not conformed to the world, but be the patterns of the world. Be not conformed to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. So to renew the mind, well, you have to plug back in to the source of that renewal, which is the place that we all came from. And how do you do that? Well, it was revealed in Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. So it's the opposite of a knowledge-based remedy. It is an intuitive-based remedy, and intuitive means knowing without reasoning. How can you do that without a source that pours into you through that pause, through that reconnection with your creator? FHU.com is where you find out more. All right, welcome back. And again, if you want to email me, it's david@fhu.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Comments, questions, whatever the case. A couple of more verses Bible verses on the body.
Ephesians 2:22, in whom you also are being built together for a habitation of God through the Spirit. Ephesians 2:21, in whom the whole building being fitted together grows into a holy temple in the Lord. John 14:23, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him.
So again, you not. Do you not know that you are the temple of the living God? That the evidence of intelligent design, I guess, is where it has to go. Because, see, for me, and I had this conversation with my buddy Al, I said, I see intelligent design. I see God in everything. And I can't not see the intelligent designer in the design. When you see, for example, a beautiful Maserati or a Ferrari, you see the designer Whether you realize it or not, you're seeing the designer, you're seeing the intelligence of the designer. When I started using a PC many decades ago, personal computer, and then started working with a complex program called Adobe Illustrator, I started to kind of get a feel for the people who built the programs, the software. I could see the intelligence there. Can you not see the intelligence of the design? Can you not see the designer? See, that would be a problem. Because if you think that, and this is what the dark side has tried to present to you, the dark side is only a salesperson, a sales being. And they have tried over the last 100 years to present to you this idea of Darwinism and evolution. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that species don't change and adapt and grow and evolve and whatever, but that's not what made things. I mean, if progressive adaptation is evolution, so be it. But that's not the case with humans. As a matter of fact, the anthropologists look back, say that, and I just saw this the other day, 200,000 years ago, not 6,000 years ago, but they have bones and remnants of what appear to be humans. But here's what they said. There's almost absolutely no difference between these 200,000 year remains and the remains of today. So there is no such thing as the evolution of the human. See, maybe the brains have getting bigger. I don't know. Maybe it's the nutrition side of it. I don't know. Maybe it's I don't know. It's not alien. There's no such thing as an alien human hybrid, in my personal opinion, although there could be people that are possessed. And I'll get into that too in the next hour. If for those of you who are tepid and don't want to deal with the dark side of things, as some people I know, don't listen to the next hour, because I will play some audio that talks about the problem of spiritual entities, but not evolution. If there are spiritual forces tampering with us, and I just want to make a point. Ever see any of those posters of people who have been on meth? Well, do you realize a person can devolve from being essentially attractive and a beautiful person in their youth to looking like a monster in a few short years after using drugs that twist the mind and distort the being? And you see some of these people, they do not look human. So is there devolution, devolution? I think there is such a thing as devolution. But mainly only in the human race, because humans are the only thing that can deviate from their original nature through sin, through temptation, through seduction, through the dark side. I mean, in Star Wars, a great metaphor, Lord Palpatine, the Dark Lord, when he became obsessed with the dark side, it turned him into something that looked like a monster. It's a good visualization of a person who starts out as a senator and seeking power, and becomes, uglified and transmogrified by the force of the dark side. Some of these things could be considered unnatural. It is an unnatural way of life that transmogrifies the human being into something that God did not make. And you know what I'm talking about. You've seen it. These creatures that murder National Guard troopers that are standing around protecting a city. These creatures, they may not look monstrous, but inside there is a monster. There's an entity that makes them pull the trigger. These wicked agents of darkness. It's just true. And so God forbid that you don't understand the nature and the purpose for which you came into this world. You are an influencer. You do have the ability to make a difference in somebody's life. And God forbid if you do not make that difference. God help you. Now, if you're struggling, be still and know. Comply with his directive. Be still and know. You will know that he is God, and he will reconnect you to the purpose for which you were created at FHU.com. This is something my dad was given as a gift, and he gave it to the world. Be still and know at FHU.com. I'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Hour 2. Yes, my friend Al says, Exhibit A, Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, she was attractive, and now she's just a creature. Many people, they start to change once they entangle themselves with the agents of darkness, no matter what it is, whether it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it all has the ultimate same effect. And by the way, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I've seen some really spectacularly attractive older people. What they have, though, is not necessarily the glow of youth, but they have the glow of wisdom. Think about that. And, this is what grandparents can often be to children, to their own children, to their grandchildren. Grandparents, represent relationship with the Creator when they're that way. And I think that, even our president, which is, I think, why the people on the dark side hate him so much, because as flawed as he is, and by the way, all of Jesus's disciples were just ordinary, flawed people. Let's not forget that. And yet the wisdom that was poured into them through their recognition, and maybe their recognition was at 10% of what Jesus and what he was and who he really was and what he represented to the human race. Let's just say that the recognition level of the disciples was 10%. And even his disciple Paul, who never was his disciple, but later became a disciple spiritually. Paul was one of the most important disciples of all because he had, he didn't have the visuals. He had only the faith. And he was converted through an amazing experience. But I just want to make that point that, Jesus shows up every time evil is present. The spirit, the power, the majesty, the depth of Jesus is also present in every moment of trivial and tribulation and trial and temptation. You're never really alone in that sense, that there's always an alternative to the snare, to the trap, to the pit. There's always an alternative. God did not make us just to be fodder. He didn't just make us to be firewood, to be thrown into the fire. He made us for a different reason. Think about that. Now, here comes another Roy Masters, the crisis of faith through emotion.
You have to get into this world where there's no thinking. When you're into this world where there's no thinking, you can see yourself thinking. That's maybe kind of strange to some people, but some people have never known this other world. They can't see themselves thinking. For instance, I can watch my television set in two ways. I can sit across the room and watch the images on the screens and follow that plot. Interesting, but not part of it. And when there's an exciting thing comes, a love scene or a violent scene, my heart doesn't beat or I don't get passionate. I'm not involved with that. I'm standing across the room just watching that. Not being part of it, it being part of me. But on the other hand, like little children, a lot of people, suddenly they're no longer in the room. They're inside the set. And their heart starts getting beating and you get all emotional, like a nightmare. When you're inside your thoughts, You're not objective to your thoughts. And as you grow older through life, especially when you're guilty, you don't like to stand in this space where you feel guilty and you know the truth. You live more and more in your thoughts, where you're more comfortable. You become part of the television set. You lose yourself in the screen, in the feelings of the moment, in the play. You identify with the actors. You identify with your own flesh. And then you forget to be aware.
Yeah, boy, it's such a mouthful what he just said. The temptations of the world are so many. I just saw today that Australia has decided to ban kids under 16 from using social media, TikTok, and all these other Chinese communist devices of corruption. 16, that's good. Because the development of the brain around corrupted ideas corrupts the being. I mean, obviously. And boy, this idea of identity and what they've done to weaponize the idea of identity is shocking. So that, and these people who are, when they wake up in the morning, you want to be a boy or a girl today, Johnny? These are people who are deliverers of just pure evil. To corrupt the innocence of a child is the worst possible thing. This is why everybody, I think, is so fixated on somebody like Jeffrey Epstein. Because who knows? I mean, I personally, I don't care. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what was done. I don't even, because the mind has no firewall. This is what the dark side understands. It knew it in the Garden of Eden, that Eve and Adam both were susceptible to influence. First, it was the influence of Creator. Creator says, don't eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay. Now comes the other voice, the other external influence. Why doesn't he want you to eat the tree? What is that all about? The dark side understands it was the first use of the power of deception. That, don't you understand? It hasn't ever changed, because in the toolbox of darkness, there's only a couple of tools. Now those tools can have many different applications, right? And basically, the Catholic Church defined the 7 deadly sins. Maybe there are more. That doesn't take a lot to corrupt human beings, because we don't have that software installed at birth. When the first 2 people in the reset of the human race were in the Garden of Eden, they didn't have it. It wasn't installed, because if that were the case, there wouldn't have been any such thing as choice. And God did not want automatons. This is what my dad is saying. He doesn't want robotic people. You can't just learn a set of instructions. Let me just put it to you this way. In the Matrix movie, there was a program, like a martial arts program. And so they plugged him into the martial arts program. Now, his brain was programmed to do martial arts. And he wakes up and he says, I know karate, or whatever it was. But his body didn't know it. His overall being didn't know it, because you have to experience certain things in order to have. It's like if you had a program that taught you how to drive a car, which this is what kids do with Grand Theft Auto and all these other race car driving programs. It doesn't mean they've driven a car. So God couldn't install the firewall for a reason. He didn't do it to make sure that we choose to be in alignment with his will. And he's reminded us over and over and over throughout the history of the Bible and the prophets and the disciples. And today, it's the same as it was in the beginning. It's never going to change in terms of the domino effect that God allows for us to be able to choose his way over the other, over the dark side. All it is two different influences that we have to see for what they are. One is good, the other is evil. And it's so sad in this world. The TikTokers and the people who use social media to influence and corrupt the youth, they understand that there's no firewall. The devil understands there's no firewall for information. Unless, of course, you see it for what it is. Now, be still and know at FHU.com. Anybody that's been meditating with Be Still and Know for any length of time knows what I'm talking about. Now it's your turn. FHU.com. Find out now. I don't want to know what the dark, evil side actually does. It would be like, I remember growing up, my father was born into a Jewish family. And I remember when I was young, growing up, seeing pictures of the Holocaust and the mass graves and just the throwing of the deceased people into these mass graves. I don't want to know, okay? You don't necessarily need to be in the grave, thrown in a grave with somebody to know how horrifying and evil is. Just think about what I'm saying. See, the knowledge of good and evil is a terrifying concept. Now, you haven't even thought about this, because there's things you cannot unsee. Hear me. And the devil knows that. The devil knows that it's just an influence that gets stuck in your mind like a piece of silly putty on a newspaper. Boom, now you got the image. Now what do you do with it? When you get exposed to certain ideas. And the other thing is really weird about it is that you can also not only be traumatized by seeing certain things that you shouldn't ever really be forced to see or have to see. You shouldn't see certain things, but you can also be desensitized through those exposures. And this is what happens. German soldiers, Jordan B. Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson, did an amazing series on Hitler and the people who served as Nazis. And they would go and round up, people, murder them, and then go home and have dinner with their families as if nothing happened. That they were desensitized to the evil itself. And the most desensitized people to evil are the greatest of servants, the abortion doctors, who get desensitized. It's just a piece of flesh. Blah, blah, blah. They are the greatest servants of darkness because they don't have any compunction. They don't have any feeling about it. Please think about what I'm saying. Don't get tempted to dip into the inkwell of darkness. Don't just, when something pops up on your phone, say no. Just say no to evil is basically what I'm saying. You don't need to experience it to know that it's evil. And you don't have to burn your finger to know that fire is hot. But once you get burned, now you know for sure, and now you got a scar. And some things you can't unsee, and some things you can't undo. Just think about what I'm saying. Think about it. Consider what I'm saying.
You exist, but not as a human being, but as a person lost in flesh and feeling. And in that sense, in that world, you have thinking, and you have the thinking which comes from reaction. See? And the thinking comes out of the feeling from the reaction. So you react, you feel, you think. And the thinking that comes into your mind is not your thinking. But you cannot see that it's not your thinking. That thinking tends to make anything, that kind of thinking, the will of the other person who intimidates you. Are you following this? The person The kind of thinking that you're involved with, you can't oppose it.
I like what you said. Are you the thinker or are you the servant of your thought? I thought that was very good.
Yeah, you're not your thinking. You're the thinker. You're supposed to be the thinker. And the thinker observes the thinking. And as long as you can observe the thinking, then you have a light, another source to observe with. There's three of you. So me, myself, and I. I'm the observer. Let's put it this way. We try to make it very... My eye is made out of basically the sun shines in the sky and gives life to all the plants and the animals and the creatures on the earth. And I eat these animals and it becomes me and I have the eye. It all comes out, all made out of the sunlight. So the sun, which in a sense, for the purpose of argument, which has created everything, gives me the eye and also the light to see by. So the light shines on objects and I see by the light, my eye sees those objects by reflected light of the sun. I never look at the sun. If I looked at the sun, my eyes would burn out. So there's the sun, there's my eye, and I look at the object reflected. Now, inside your body, you have a spiritual self. And the soul is the spiritual eye. It's a perception. We see, but we also perceive.
And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. You see, you have two persons. He, the demon, came out of him, the man. So there was more than one person there. There was the man, and there was the person of the demon or the evil spirit in the man.
This is a gentleman named Derek Prince, and I'm going to play some of this audio for you. It's really important for a lot of reasons. But more importantly, to realize that what he's doing is he's making an important distinction between the man and the spirit that inhabits the man. We already have a spirit, by the way. As we come into this world, that's the gift. I do believe that maybe in certain circumstances, people that are born with extreme disabilities, sometimes it's in the form of physical disabilities. They have certain names that they call it, and I don't even know if that's what it is. But is it possible that people can be born into this world without a spiritual nature? I think it is. I think it's possible. But if we're born into this world and we have a spiritual nature, this is the first indication that we are not physical beings having spiritual experiences, but we are spiritual beings having physical experiences. Jesus was a spiritual being having a physical human experience, not the other way around. Jesus was not a human being, although his human was important as a delivery system for the spirit. How else can you look at it? Animals quite differently. Animals have what is called animus, which is an animal spirit. But it serves only as a survival mechanism, the spirit of an animal. And it's a completely different thing. And who knows, though? I mean, it is, the Bible says that on earth as it is in heaven, maybe there are animal species in heaven as well. I don't know. People say they see their dogs. Not the point. Our spirit is really what matters here. And of course, I believe that we are to be good stewards of this earth. And this earth is a representation of the Creator who made it. And if you're not taking good care of this earth, God help you. All right, quick break here, FHU.com. You'll find out about the be still and no exercise. And that will realign you with the purpose for which you were created, FHU.com. All right, welcome back. So I will go back to the very beginning here with Derek Prince. Interesting guy. I I believe that he is British or English. And he was a guy who was very, in my opinion, very much aligned with the things that my dad had taught. So, yes, I'm going to play some Derek Prince for you. Now, please just be warned in the sense that he goes into this idea of people not, you can't, when you're dealing with people who are possessed or who, he calls it being demonized. He's saying that you can't identify the spirit in the person with the person. Very important distinction. This is one of the things that my dad is explaining as well. So, Derek Prince, here comes clip number 1.
Tonight we're going to go further and we're going to deal with spiritual warfare on earth. And primarily, persons with whom we make warfare on earth are demons or evil spirits. In September of last year, I was living with one of my married daughters in the UK, and I went for a medical checkup and was referred to what they call in England, a consultant, the top medical rank, and I was diagnosed with cancer of the bladder. This was a very thorough diagnosis with a cystoscopy, an internal inspection. And furthermore, they told me it was a dangerous form of cancer because it was liable to spread to other parts of the body. Well, I was not afraid. I felt somehow that God was in control. And I was living with one of my married daughters, as I said, and she had a friend, the family had a friend who was a curate. So I was with in my daughter's house, and we had a phone call from a young man, a curate in the Anglican Church, young enough to be my grandson. And he said, I would like to come and pray for you. May I come? So, of course, I said, yes, you're welcome. He was a little timid. He sat at the opposite end of the living room. And after a while, I said to him, now, I want you to understand, I'm not necessarily expecting that if you pray for me, I'll instantly be totally healed of cancer. But come and pray anyhow. So he came. I was sitting in a chair. He stood beside me, put his hand on my shoulder, and began to pray. And it was like, I can only say like cats fighting inside my chest. I have never experienced such intense conflict within me. And I let out a loud, prolonged, sustained roar. Not just a shout, it was a roar. And at that moment, I knew that I had been delivered from a demon of cancer. Now, about 6 months later, as far as I know, there is no evidence of cancer anywhere in my body. So I want to encourage you, it pays to get delivered from demons. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be fearful. Just accept what God has for you.
Derek Prince, British missionary, 1915 to 2003. But again, there are these forces at work, and he's describing it. And when I want to make a point about prayer, that people, pure spirits, and there are very few, do have intercessory capacities. I've witnessed things happen to people, but they have to be ready. So if Derek Prince is describing how he was prayed for by a young man, and he described him as being very young, and on a low level of the church, the Anglican Church of England, but nonetheless, that it would seem to me that a person of faith, it doesn't take that much to move the needle. You know what I mean? People of faith are in a different space than people without it. People without it are people that are leaning heavily on other people for other, emotional support, and going to the doctors and begging the doctors not to let them die, and so on and so on. And so it seems to me that this Derek Prince had lived his life in such a way that he was ready for this kind of deliverance. I'm just saying, and again, the miraculous can happen. But if you don't believe it, can never happen, right? Although you may be a person who is full of doubt, and then God can work with you anyway. But God forbid that you don't believe. God forbid, right? Because then really there is no redemption. Here comes another clip of second clip of Derek Prince.
Now I want to turn to the pattern of the ministry of Jesus in this particular aspect of deliverance from evil spirits. And I want to read from Mark chapter 1, a description of the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, beginning at verse 21. Mark 1:21. Then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit. The Greek says, in an unclean spirit. And I want to suggest to you that that man had probably been attending the synagogue like a good religious Jew for many, many, many years. But it says, and he, and if you read it carefully, it's not the man, it's the spirit. He cried out, saying, let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Now, it's a remarkable fact that the demon in the man immediately knew who Jesus was. It took his disciples about 12 months to discover what the demon already knew. So we're dealing with people with supernatural knowledge. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, be quiet. The Greek says, be muzzled and come out of him. Now, Jesus was not speaking to the man. He was speaking to the demon in the man. It's very important to see that. There comes a point when we don't deal with people, we deal with the demons in people, whether they're in us or in other people.
Now, just again, more of a distinction here. And years ago, I was involved in writing a movie script with my dad called The Satan Principle. And the subhead or the subtitle was, it's evil that says there is no evil. So you understand that if a person doesn't want to deal with evil, they're more susceptible to it. You know, the image of the ostrich with its head in the ground. You just can't stick your head in the ground, or you can't pretend that darkness and evil don't exist and have it not existed. It is childish at best, and it is foolish and naive and a form of wickedness at worst to pretend that evil doesn't exist. There are people who are very evil who say it's just human nature. And I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that human nature was designed by the Creator because the Creator designed all of nature. It wasn't designed to be dark and twisted and destructive. It was designed to give us choices that we can make. And maybe this is an angel factory. Who knows? I don't believe that you just end and you go up and you lounge around in heaven all day long with your friends and your family. To me, that's like a waste. You got to be useful for something else. If you've made it through the crucible of this life, and I mean, it's my prayer. I'll put it out in the universe right now. I hope that God turns me into something that's more useful than what I was as a human. Don't you? I hope so. Yeah. I really do. Because if you're not more useful beyond this life, what's the point of the next life, in my opinion? And the flip side of that is, you know, when there are people who have near-death experiences that go into hell. And then they realize what they never saw, what they never wanted to see, what they didn't care about on earth. And they see that there is, in fact, a dark realm. And then even from that place, their consciousness exists, and within it potentially is the ability to cry out for God. And these sometimes people come back to life and they're absolutely transformed only because they've seen this alternative reality that we call hell. And I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know ever. There's certain things you don't want to know. You know what I'm saying? There are just certain things that you simply never want to find out. I don't want to find out what we're done to trafficked children. I don't want to find out what was. I've seen enough of what was done to, millions of people during the Holocaust. We've seen we heard about what was done in Israel in the October attack, burning babies in their cribs. Oh my gosh. Yes, it's terrible. I don't want to know more than what I've heard. I don't want to see it because for me, I'm a visual thinker. I don't want to unsee it. I don't want to have to deal with that. Although I do have the Be Still and Know. It allows me to step out of the imprint of evil, to not have to struggle with thoughts, even though thoughts are going to pour into you. Your mind is like a screen door in a submarine. Thoughts are going to pour into you. And unless you have a light that shines on those thoughts and reveals them for what they are, they're going to just circulate around. So, FHU.com, you'll find the Be Still and Know, and on the premium side of the website, tens of thousands of hours of Roy Masters radio programs for your edification, to awaken you to your potential at FHU.com.
I must assume that with the long pause there.
No, I have one segment.
Oh, you have one more segment to go?
Yeah, one more segment, 7 minutes.
Well, my alarm is a little bit early then.
There you go. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, one more segment for you. How about a couple more Bible verses on the body?
Romans 8, verse 11. But if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, 1 Peter 2:5, you also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood. Hebrews 3:6, but Christ as a son over his own house, whose house we are.
Yeah, we're built up as a temple, right? And in other words, so if you're not being built up as a temple, what are you being built as? That's the question. What are you being built as? That is the question. And that needs to be answered. What are you building your life for? What are you building toward? And what are you building away from? All important questions. And let's see here. Let me play another Roy Masters. The crisis of faith through emotion.
In other words, we're not just only looking with the flesh eye of the beast, with the eye of the sun. We're now looking deeper into things. Especially in people, we see their motives. We see another source, another intelligence, another will moving up through them. Only if you're objective. Only if you're objective do you have that light that reflects on those dark images in people, those wills in people, and gives you insight to what's going on in their mind, their motives for you. And then, only then, when you have that objectiveness, when you're standing in this space within yourself, do you have the strength to oppose. It's like alligators. If you want to fight an alligator, you don't jump in the river. You fight from your own turf. You lasso them. You stand on the bank and you pull the alligator out of the water onto your ground. You don't jump into the water with them if you can help it. They know best how to. It's the same with you. You do not fight evil, the wills of others, from their dimension. Because there are two types of people who live in their unconscious, in their intellectual, imaginary dream mind. The willful and the willless. Because, let's see if I can say it another way. I think I'm coming across to you. There's another way of seeing things, another way of believing. There is a presence. There is a sensing. You have senses of your body, and there is a presence, a will on the other side of those senses, whether it's in people or whether it's just in the ether. There is a will. There's an ever-present something that is malevolent. And even little children, if they're not careful, you must watch little children very carefully, because if you leave them alone, something will jump into the child, psychically assault them. Something will say to a kid, pick up that stone and beat that kid's brains out. And they'll do it. Some kids may not. They'll see the idea and they say, where'd that come from? It scares them. Another kid who is not that aware, who's been violated to the point where he's lost that awareness, most kids have, he may pick up that brick and hit a kid and not feel any remorse. So you have two sides. Now, you have a presence of mind, and a presence apart from the presence of mind. In other words, any time that you can be seduced away from this inner objective state of consciousness where you know all things for sure, and you have the strength to resist all things, which is not of the will that you were born with, but born of some other malevolent influence. As long as you're standing in this objective state, and you know the rules, don't get angry, don't get upset, don't overreact, don't fall for flattery. As long as you can stay there, in this objective state, nothing can hurt you. You'll always have faith. And you'll always move and have your being by the right source. But remember what I said a few moments ago, there are forces that want to displace that and create in Hades on earth. A kingdom, if you like. And of course, evil, whatever that is, it has no creative force of its own. It has to steal. It has to borrow. It has to take over the creations of God and make them slaves in his service to do his will on earth as it is in Hades. There are two forces at work. One from within, a presence that constantly impresses itself upon you if you are there to receive it.
Indeed, it's true. And, you can feel it in the form of conscience. He talked about guilt a little bit, Roy did. And he says, once you feel guilt, once you start feeling guilt as a result of giving into some temptation or some intimidation, that's when you start to move away from the truth through guilt. So let's say you've been intimidated. Let's say somebody's hurt you and you've given into hating them or wanting to get revenge or whatever. You start to move away from the light of reality that shines the truth. And this is what we're seeing in our world today. And so you mustn't give in to hating those who are trying to confuse you and destroy your relationship with your original self. That happened already a long time ago. It started when you were a child. And this is what my dad, Roy Masters, he was trying to explain it to people. He did it and really effectively when people were first exploring alternative truth. And, and he got a lot of pushback from the mainstream churches. But he was trying to help people see something a little bit more than what the church was trying to show them. Because they don't know. I mean, what are you going to do? You don't know what you don't know. So that's why, my dad's legacy must continue. We need your support in order for that to happen. For those of you who do, we thank you. It is that time of year. A friend of mine just gave a very nice contribution to FHU. It would be helpful. It is tax deductible to keep this program going, and spread the word. Also, I invite you to email me at david@fhu.com and critique the show. Tell me what you would like to hear about, what you don't want to hear about. I don't care. How did I do? Did I do a good job? Or did I not? david@fhu.com, and Be Still and Know is available at fhu.com. It's online. You can listen to it online. fhu.com. Thanks for listening.
There we go.
Here it is.
Now I'm not premature. Okay. Goodbye, streamer people.